Hello, everyone, and
Hello.
welcome to Women That Shred. It's Wednesday, 10 a.m. I'm still getting used to the time difference because I was so used to for 1 p.m. Eastern. But welcome, everyone, to the show. I see Bruce already hopped in. Hey, Bruce. So I have here it's Elizabeth, right? Because
Elizabeth.
it's with an A, which is you're the
Yeah.
first Elizabeth I've ever met.
Well, there are 12 of us in the world. So you had a like one in something
How do you
thousand
know that?
billion shot. It's if you go online, you can look up how many of you there are. So there are only 12
Seriously?
Elizabeths in the world documented.
Oh my
Like
gosh, that's
birth
so cool. I'm
certificate.
doing that
Yeah.
after this. I'm
Do
going to
it.
see.
It's awesome. You have a very unique name too. So I have a feeling you're gonna have some other people, but maybe not very many. You could be like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm one in 100.
yeah, I think there's way more than that. But really quickly, so I promised. So Christina, she is probably I was gonna say she might have missed like one show since I started Women That Tread, but it's Christina's birthday today. And so the fact that
Ooh,
she's
happy
in,
birthday.
yeah, happy birthday, Christina. So I promised her I'd give her a happy birthday shout out. So
Ooh, happy birthday, Christina.
yes, yes. So Elizabeth, it's kind of cute because before we hopped on, we were, commenting on already professionalism because I was
Yep.
already talking about how I don't have any makeup on. I let my hair air dry. I've got a t-shirt. I'm in the office, and
Mhm.
a lot of people would think that is so unprofessional, especially since you're doing a live show. So it's like a
No.
perfect segue into our conversation about professionalism and what does that mean and how is it
Yeah.
changing?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of those things where when I was getting ready, we were talking about it. I'm like, all right, I got to put makeup on today. I usually don't put makeup on. And then I got to pick out something to wear. But it's such a hard question because you want to dress like you. You don't want to come off as I'm trying to be professional because I'm going to record, but you
Yeah.
also want to have that air of professionalism. So, like,
Yeah.
what is it?
I was thinking about that on the way here, and I think a lot what has to do with professionalism is respect. Because I was thinking about how okay, so let's say, we both walk into the office and you're all decked out in a suit, makeup done, your hair did, looking, just like on point, right? And then I walk in and I look like a hot mess, right? But I look like a hot mess. But let's say you go ahead and start like, maybe gossiping a little bit, or
Yeah,
maybe not like bringing stuff from home that maybe isn't necessarily appropriate at the workplace,
right,
or you start kind of disrespecting your coworkers, right? And then
right,
I'm kind of like, doing my thing, being very respectful. So I thought I was like, well, then I would think that I'm being more professional as opposed to
right,
Elizabeth just because she looks professional, if
right,
that makes
right.
sense. It
No,
really
that's
your action, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. I mean, one of the things that in a lot of the conversations I've been having about this recently is we were taught whenever, pre-pandemic, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whenever, that professionalism was showing up in a suit. It was showing up as an individual who was going to sit down, put their head down, and get to work. We were taught that if you were a professional, you were going to achieve a career and accolades and money, and you had set goals. And I think one of the biggest changes has been that introduction to, okay, the pandemic happened. We all went home. We realized people have lives outside of their job. And then bringing that introduction of the self into the equation. Because when we're talking about professionalism anymore, I personally feel like you still have those hallmarks. You have integrity, you have equality, you have respect, you have competencies. But at the end of the day, the thing that's changed is our approach and adding that personality.
Mm. Yeah, no, and I get that. And even Bruce, and sorry, my video is shaky, and I don't know if it's like the ground here is shaky at
God.
the office, but I just noticed that. So I apologize if I'm giving some people a headache. Yeah, so Bruce had mentioned that being real is part of being professional, right? But the thing is like, it's interesting because, so as part of the LinkedIn content creator program, I get, emails that kind of give us what like the trending topics are going to be and
Mhm.
maybe things that we can talk about. And one of it was, there was a woman that wrote an article in the New York Times that said that your authentic self does not belong in the workplace. Right. So, and I wanted to go read it, but I had to have a subscription to New York Times, and I'm cheap, and I just didn't sign up for her. And
I
I
hate
was
when that
Googling,
happens.
yeah, and I was Googling other articles kind of along the same lines to read up and read
Right.
it, like what they meant by that. And I guess a lot of it was bringing stuff from home, talking about things that aren't necessarily appropriate at the workplace.
Right.
And I get that. But I mean, for me, I have to be honest, and people that have worked with me, people that I've worked, below, like my bosses, I think they can all tell you that I'm the exact same person in the office that I am at home. Like, I kind of come in and I'm just like me. And there have been times where I kind of question myself. I'm like, oh, maybe, I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I'm acting a little bit too much like myself. But so far, no one has pulled me aside and said, you know what, Raquel, you got to tone it down. If anything, I feel like they kind of respect that I feel comfortable enough, if you will.
Right.
And not only that, like, there's something to be said if you come to work and you feel like you can just be who you are. I think that there's something to be said about the people that you work with, the company
Right.
environment. I think that's important, right? Because if you're coming in and not showing up as who you are and you're trying to be someone else, then I think that's where the issue
Right.
lies.
There's a comfort in that. There's a comfort in knowing who you are. And whenever you can bring that into a conversation, you're able to add more value
Yeah.
because you're not afraid to speak up and say, hey, this is how I'm viewing it. Maybe it's the right way we should be doing it, the wrong way, but you're going to go in there and say, hey, we need to talk about everybody's opinions. We need to bring in inclusivity. We need to have diversity. And I think professionalism kept a lot of those conversations from happening, but we opened up and we're now talking about those things. And it's a difficult conversation and it's hard to have in a professional environment, but here we are having them. And I think it's because people came in and said, hey, this is who I am. I'm going to be unapologetically me. And a good example is you. You are unapologetically yourself, but guess what? That attracts people to you. You bring positivity and energy and light into a space. And so, because of that, people want to hear what you have to say. People want you to be you. And I think the more we focus on being ourselves, the more we welcome that diversity, that inclusion, that warm energy that comes with just being a real person. And I think that kind of all goes back to empathy. One of the
Mm.
things I think is a new trait of professionalism is empathy, because it used to be a very cold kind of feeling in the corporate world. And now we're opening up and we're showing our people. We're showing, hey, this is what makes an organization great is our people. And I mean, a good example in my personal life is I started in the mortgage industry only a year ago. My first
Yeah,
week was at
you're
MBA annual.
a newbie.
Yeah, I started with MBA annual last year, and I had been in the finance industry for a while. The corporate culture, very stiff, very, you keep everything separate, you don't bring yourself in. And then I went into the tech industry, very different,
Mhm.
because the whole idea of the tech industry is we're trying to make the human life easier. And I was working for a company that worked with like SaaS solutions, and they were focusing on how do we make communication happen during the pandemic. And we
Mm.
had to think, well, what is somebody going through in order to get there? And then I come over to the mortgage industry and it's a step further. Our whole job is getting somebody into a home. That's such a human experience. And whenever we're in this industry and we're having this human experience, it's so hard to keep ourselves out of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so the professionalism, you can see it in the way that people are now dressing at conferences and the way people are acting at conferences. We've gone from, I hear from people who've been in the industry 20, 30 years, we would never think to wear a t-shirt and jeans to a conference. But here we are wearing, branded t-shirts, jeans. My new favorite thing to wear to a conference is sparkly tennis shoes, because then my feet don't kill all day and I'm showing a little bit about my personality. And I think that is something that wouldn't have happened 20, 30 years ago. But it's something that's happening now because we're realizing that we bring in a personal element, we bring in empathy, compassion, personality, and it just enhances the relationship with our borrowers, with our lenders, with our fellow mortgage industry individuals. It's just such it brings passion. I think
Yeah.
that's really what it is. It brings passion. And that's something that you really can't find when you're keeping it in this closed, narrow lane of professionalism.
Yeah. And I think also, you mentioned how you're newer, you're just a year in and you're younger, so you're
Yeah.
bringing a different element and bringing a different light. And that's what's so great about the fact that we have younger generations coming in, because you guys are
Mm-hmm.
changing the landscape of most industries. And I love that you're changing the landscape of the mortgage industry as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you're coming in bringing this whole fresh outlook. And I mean, you're the ones that are responsible for the evolvement of what professionalism is. At least I believe that, right? Because if you think about it, it's the people that are veterans that have been in here for a while. They kind of are set in their ways, and they are used to
Right.
coming to conferences in suits and used to acting a certain way. So it takes people like yourself to come in, and like myself to come in and be like, hey, wait, doesn't feel right for us, and now we're in here, and this is our
Right.
space too. So then we have to make it feel right for us and make us, feel comfortable in it as well. So I think that there's going to come a point where we're not going to even, this conversation is not going to even be relevant because
Right.
it's going to be the norm. I feel like it's still relevant because there is still kind of like that divide.
Yeah, there's a dichotomy there. You have two very different ideas. And I think it's almost a scale now. You don't
Mm,
necessarily have, one side versus the other. You have your scale. You have your people who want to dress in a suit and think that professionalism is keeping your head down and going the straight and narrow. And then you have the other side, which we're talking about. And then I think there is that middle gray area where
mm-hmm.
you have individuals who aren't quite ready to show up at a conference in a t-shirt,
Right.
but they are ready to welcome those personal conversations into the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing. It's I was just at a conference just last week,
Mm-hmm.
and it was interesting to see like a total like just the style and just like
Yeah.
everybody was, yeah, there were people in suits, there were women, in their high heels and their dresses, and then there was the opposite too. But it didn't matter. It wasn't like the people that were dressed, maybe a little bit more casual weren't, integrating with the people that were wearing suits. It's like it's gotten to the point where everybody's like, I feel like respecting each other's uniqueness
Right.
and respecting the fact that, yeah, like I don't like to wear heels anymore. I actually just went into my closet and I'm getting ready to donate a bunch of my business dresses, suits, and heels to organizations like Dress for Success. And
Right.
because I realized like it's just not me anymore, and I just don't feel comfortable in it. And I went out and bought a particular pair of just like flats, patent
Mm-hmm.
leather flats for the conference. It was the first time I've ever worn flats at a conference, but I was like so happy I did. By the end of the
Right.
day, when everybody else was like struggling to stand, I was like, "Oh, I can still stand."
Well, and I think too, even when you were saying that, we are lowering the barriers of entry into the professional world by doing that.
Ooh, I
Whenever
like.
we look at suits, whenever we look at dress clothes, when we look at heels, we're looking at the quality of someone's clothing, which makes it more difficult for young professionals and minorities to make it into the professional world. So, by eliminating that necessity, we're allowing people to wear what they have access to and not
Mhm.
look at them any different, because your ability to adhere to a certain standard of dress, a certain standard of I don't want to say behavior because it's not behavior, but a certain standard of corporate guidelines does not determine the quality of your work, does not determine who you are as a person. And I think that's kind of where we're getting to as we talk about professionalism. We're
Yeah.
talking about your professionalism is determined by what you can do as an individual, not by what you are or what you aren't.
Yes. And there's something very empowering about that. I know that for me, I was, talking at the conference last week at a breakout session about content marketing, and I
Mhm.
was talking about, how when you show up on social media, And I was just talking about how for me, I show up like as real as it gets. Like I was just saying how I did a reel from my bed
Right.
last night in my PJs, no makeup. I have no makeup on right now. And there's something really empowering about the fact of like, this is like as stripped down as it possibly can be. And people are still respecting me. They're still looking
Mm-hmm.
at me as a professional. They still, are kind of feeling like, and at the same time, relatable. All of these things where
Right.
there's something to be said about that. And so I really want that for everyone. I want everyone to be able to be in a place of like, this is me, and people are still accepting me for who I am and respecting me for it.
Right.
And I'm just being myself. I don't have to pretend to be anybody else. And I feel like once we can all get to that place, that level of just kind of confidence in who you are, I think that's when it's really going to change the game, just in general, and like the level of humanity.
Right.
It's just, I think that's kind of what's lacking right now, is that we're like comparing ourselves to others. If I see other women that are all dolled up all the time and are looking the part, maybe I walk into the room and then it makes me feel kind of like
Right.
inadequate because I'm not at that standard of dress or whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm like, that doesn't matter to me. It's my character. It's, my integrity. It's,
Right.
all of those things. And I think that's what we got to get back to with the professionalism. It's not so much the material part of it. It's who you are as a person and what you stand for. And yeah, so that's why I love having this conversation, because I'm sure there's people that have a lot of opinions
Right. No, absolutely. And I think
around.
going beyond the look or the dress of professionalism, when we talk about what makes you a professional anymore, I feel like that is also changing. So
Mm,
no longer are we being told we're a professional because we achieve a certain thing. The
yeah.
people who are thought leaders and industry leaders are now people who value things like work-life balance. I think it was last week you were talking with Zuha, and something really impacted me, and it was when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful to hear that from someone who is a leader in our industry, because that is what professionalism is. It's having that work life balance. It's active listening. It's that empathy. It's those transferable soft skills that I think a lot of us were not necessarily taught in formal education. We weren't taught as young professionals because we were being taught the hard skills. We were being taught the tasks we would do in our job. And now, when we define professionalism, the industries are so fluid. Our
Yeah.
job roles are so fluid that the things that matter are those soft skills, the communication, the active listening, the competencies to connect. These are the things that I really think are defining professionalism now, because
I love, because that's my forte. Like those are my
yeah,
strengths. I struggled a lot in high school in the sense that I went to a private school just right down the street from here. So it's kind of crazy when I come to work every day. But it's a private school, essentially college prep school. And I'm there with top notch, like so smart. And
right.
it was difficult for me to get good grades. Right. And so I was kind
Mhm.
of like, the book smart. I have to be smart. I have to get A's. Like that's how I valued, like, okay, what it means to be smart and what it means to be able to succeed in the world, to be a professional, all of those things. But I already had all these soft skills, like
Right.
I already had them in me. They were innate, right? But it wasn't until just recently that I realized, like, well, shoot, had I embraced those soft skills at a much younger age and realized like how important they were and how they really were going to help me in the
Right.
future, I probably would have benefited from it. But once again, my journey is my journey. And for whatever reason, it took
Right.
a really long time
Well,
for me to get
and
here.
if everybody was book smart, it'd be a very boring world.
Super boring.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing. Like, I will tell you,
Sorry,
I
book smart people.
no, I mean, I'm saying that as somebody
No, no, no.
who I was a book smart as a kid in high school. Like, I was doing the AP classes, but then I was also going and doing theater. And did I
Oh,
like my friends who were in the smart classes? Yes. Did I love my friends who were in theater because they didn't take themselves too seriously and
yeah.
they had fun? Yes. And because if we were all book smart, there would be jobs that could not be done on this planet. There are reasons that we all have the skills we have. And so when we're talking about this professionalism, we're looking beyond the individual skills and we're looking at what makes us a better community, what makes us a better connector. rather
Mhm.
than looking at, okay, I can tell you that 2 plus 2 is 4. You know what I mean? It's just, I mean, in some equations you could probably get to 5, but
Right.
but that's the idea is we're focusing on being human. At the end of the day,
Mhm.
we're all human.
Yeah. And I think COVID really sped that up. Once
Yeah.
again, I think a lot of the conversations we're having wouldn't be had if it weren't for COVID,
Yeah.
because COVID really lifted that veil. I talk about how, in an Oz where the curtain was lifted and you saw the real Oz behind the
Yeah.
curtain. A lot of that happened during COVID with our leaders, like we had leaders probably in a lot of our companies that we were used to having them, come in the
Mhm.
boardroom with their suit, having everyone sit down. All right, we're going to have our meeting. And then suddenly COVID hits and they're at home. And this is actually, I think this is probably one of the funniest things. And you might have heard about it. And a lot of, people in the industry might have heard about it. Because remember, is it Clay, the CEO of Housing Wire? Is
Oh,
it,
I don't know.
sorry, I'm so sorry, I forgot his name. But so he had, like, I guess his first like meeting and it was through Zoom. And apparently, like, as soon as he got on the Zoom, suddenly you hear his wife like screaming in the background because the dog had just run in from the backyard, had like a mouse in his or a rat in his
Oh
mouth.
no.
So the kids are all freaking out, screaming, and here he's trying to like start this like business meeting. And I think it was their
Right.
first Zoom during COVID. And automatically everyone started laughing, and it's like the guard went down. And so I bet you
Right.
from that moment on, his employees and people that work with him probably saw him in a completely different light.
Right. Well,
Right. And
it
I think
also
it
taught us patience. It
yes, and that we're
it
all
taught us,
human.
right. Right. Well, I mean, a good example is, after COVID, and a lot of us are still working from home, we have to accept that there are going to be days where there is a screaming 3-year-old in the background. And we have to accept that my corgis might bark. Like, I did not do my typical apology, but I have them well trained, but they hear somebody else's voice and they start barking. I mean, it is
Yeah,
a fact of the working from home.
yeah,
And so it has reminded us to be patient with others in a time when being patient was very hard.
yes,
And
yeah,
then on that other side of it, like, you did have to learn how to be professional while working from home. A good example is Nicole Mattiello, who works with me at Certified,
well,
had
I
two
had as my
kids.
guest as
Yes,
well.
you did. She was working from home and she had two kids that were doing homeschool. And so they had to learn how to read. Was she on a video call? Was she on mic? What was she doing? Could I interrupt mom, who was on the phone? Because she did have to keep up a certain level of professionalism. And so she basically had to train her kids. So there are the two sides of it. There is that side that we're not quite at the point where, you can hold your baby on your lap as you're on a Zoom meeting with your client,
I'm sure there
but
but I bet
oh,
you
there
are.
have
I bet you there are some out there that have done that.
no, it has happened. We were on a vendor call,
Yeah.
trying to find a new vendor, and the rep picked up his baby from the pack and play and put it on his lap. And I'm not sure if it was a sales tactic or if it was just the
Yeah.
baby was being fussy. But at
Yeah.
that time, it was distracting. And so there is a world where we can go too far into the casual, as you were saying, bringing work or bringing life into the office.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't be ourselves. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that we have to be, the cookie cutter professional.
Yeah, it's the boundaries. And I think, Sue and I mentioned that at last week as well. And that's something that
Mhm.
a lot of times it's like it's just setting those boundaries, because a lot of times they do get blurred. I grew up in a household where there really were no boundaries. So I had to learn how to be able to set
Yeah.
boundaries. And it took me a really long time. I mean, I'm one of those people that I can kind of maybe overstep, because once again, when I've never had any boundaries, you don't know what that means. So for people that, yeah, maybe grew up in like I did, we're like, what's a boundary? What's
Yeah.
saying no, or what's knowing when to kind of like, okay, zip it, right?
Right.
And that's something that I had to really learn too, because I understood, yeah, like you're in a workplace, you're now in a professional environment, you're in the corporate world, and now I had to really learn what boundaries meant and how to implement them. And now I'm really good at boundaries. Like now it's
Right.
second nature for me. But that was a really difficult for me, thing for me as well. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that maybe still struggle with that as well, because
Right.
yeah, our childhood has a lot to do with the way we react in the
Well,
moment.
and two, I mean, especially when you go from you were in the office every day to you're working at home, and then you're
Yeah,
back in the office and you
yeah,
spent 2 years
yeah,
unlearning everything you had learned. And now you're
yeah.
going back and you're like, where are the boundaries? They keep moving.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So that's another thing too, that I think that's kind of like naturally just evolving and people having
Right.
to adjust to. Yeah, because at home you could just be on your couch in your PJs with your laptop, on your lap, and with bombs,
Well,
whatever.
none
I
of
don't.
us do that.
I know. And then you come into work and you're like, oh, let me act the same way. Like, yeah, you can't
Yeah.
necessarily be doing the same thing, at the office. But I mean, I know there are so many of us that like I said, my entire wardrobe has changed because
Yep.
like I was looking in it and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot do
Right.
heels. Like as much as I have like longer pants because I would buy them with the intent of heels. So now I have to go and tailor all my pants. Wah, wah, wah. I know it's hashtag first world problems, but
No, but it
it's
is a real problem. Tailoring is
yeah.
expensive. We don't all want to have to, or you don't want to have to go out and buy new pants.
I don't
So
want to
I
have
get
to
it.
buy new clothes. Yeah, so that, but it's definitely changed for me,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with it. But I have to be like remind myself, 47. Just a year ago, I didn't think that my entire taste in my wardrobe was going to change. So who knows what will happen a year from now? And that's one other thing that
Right.
I'm reminded of, like Raquel, things are always changing, always
Right.
evolving. Like, it's never good to just get set in your ways. You have to be open to new ideas. You have to be open to
Mm-hmm.
everything. And so for me, having the opportunity to speak, on the show with so many different women and get so
Right.
many different opinions and insights and wisdom, like to me, that is so golden. Like I feel like
Right.
I'm so blessed to be able to have the opportunity to do this, because we are
Well, and it's
constantly.
wonderful that you're sharing it too. You're sharing it with the women of the mortgage industry, of LinkedIn. I mean, there are people beyond the
And
mortgage industry that
YouTube
follow
and
you, like
Twitch.
YouTube, everyone. Like you are reaching such a wide audience and bringing different opinions and ideas to others. And you're doing it as yourself. You're not, this personality that you've created. You don't have to fit that cookie cutter mold, which empowers other women to be themselves. And I think that's what resonates best. And that's why people follow, is because you are yourself. And I think it's
Yeah,
a lesson to the rest of us, especially as, Gen Z enters the workforce. They're a very authentic group. Like I am like just
oh,
on
believe
that
me, I know
lawn.
because my kids are Gen Zers. A 21-year-old
they
and an 18-year-old, so I
they're
know very
so,
well.
yeah, they're confident and they're authentic.
Yeah,
And if they think something that is, not right, they speak up. And it's a
yeah,
lesson that we all could learn, you
yeah,
know, having that empathy, having the compassion, because at the end of the day, we are all human.
yeah. I know, and I'm learning so much from my kids and their friends, and I mean, they're the future. So
Yeah.
it's like I'm starting to feel like I'm that generation that's like kind of stubborn in certain things, and I'm like Raquel, like the same way that you complain about your parents, your kids are complaining about you. So get over it because you know
I
what I
often
mean.
think about that. Like when I complain about something, I'm like, oh, yep.
I know.
This is how my parents felt when I was complaining to them.
Yeah, and well, in my
Yep.
relationship with my parents has really changed. It's a much better relationship with them because I am a mom and I have,
Hmm.
my two kids, so I can totally empathize. And like you said, the empathy part of it really does change the way you think and the way
Yeah.
you relate to someone else, and really, have that patience. Yeah, because it's
Right.
it's changed the way I view my parents, and like yeah, because it ain't easy, and I have good kids
Yeah.
too. That's the thing. I have
Oh,
really good kids, and it can still be a little bit taxing to raise them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Raising these corgis is really hard. People talk about their kids in professional settings, and I'm like, yeah, my, Winston and Beatrice. They're a
Oh
handful.
my gosh, names Winston and Beatrice.
Yep, they're my children. Whenever people talk about their kids, I'm like, yeah, real hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're a lot of work too, I know, so, you know, I'm a proud mother.
Corgi mom.
Well, we are at the 30-minute limit, so we already, like,
Yeah.
wrapped this up, but what's kinda cool is that I get to be on your podcast right after this,
Yes.
have a
So
conversation.
exciting. It'll go live on the 6th. So hear more from Raquel.
Yes, but thank you to everyone that showed up. Christina, happy birthday again.
Happy
Lisa, Bruce, you had to
birthday.
jump off, and then, you know, a lot of people, check out the replay. So, thanks
Yeah.
again, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Raquel. This is so much fun. I love this.
See
Thank
everyone.
you.
I will see all of you next Wednesday.
Bye.